After 3 years of marriage, Julian had cheated 7 times. Each time, I would cry and make a fuss, he would apologize, and the cycle repeated. Until his white moonlight returned to the country, I became quiet. At the banquet, I stared at her aloof and noble pianist brother, my heart pounding like a drum. It turns out it wasn't that I couldn't love anymore. It was because I hadn't met the right person. Julian was still holding his white moonlight, reminiscing about the past. And I had already figured out how to turn her brother into my husband. The news of Vivian's return was personally told to me by Julian. When he spoke, his eyes looked out the window, his fingertips lightly tapping on the table. As if talking about something insignificant. I knew he was waiting for me to smash the cup in my hand like before. Or cry and ask him why he was always like this. But I just hummed in response and continued applying my lipstick. Julian turned his face, his eyes showing a strange inquiry. "Don't you have anything to say?" I pursed my lips to make the color more even. The person in the mirror had calm brows and eyes. Was the journey smooth? "Say hello for me." He was stunned there, like punching into cotton. The banquet was hosted by the Lin family to welcome Vivian back. Julian changed into 3 suits, finally choosing the one I had praised as looking affectionate. I chose the simplest black dress, with nothing around my neck, only wearing a pair of pearl earrings. When I entered holding his arm, I felt his tense muscles. Vivian was in the center of the crowd, dressed in white like snow, with a bright smile. She waved at Julian, her eyes sparkling. Julian subconsciously wanted to let go of my hand. I withdrew my arm first. "Go ahead." He looked a bit embarrassed and whispered, "Don't overthink it." I smiled, my gaze already passing over his shoulder. It landed beside the piano in the corner. He sat on the piano stool, his profile as cold as snow on distant mountains. His fingers rested on the keys but didn't play. The surrounding clamor seemed separated from him by a layer of glass. Vivian pulled Julian over, her voice crisp, "Brother, look who's here." He raised his eyes. He first looked at Julian and nodded faintly. Then his gaze fell on me. It paused for a second. Perhaps shorter. But the pile of long cold ashes in my heart suddenly sparked into flames. Julian spent the whole evening revolving around Vivian. Passing wine, chatting and laughing, brushing off the ribbon on her shoulder. Just like every time before. I sat on the high stool by the window, sipping champagne in small mouthfuls. My gaze was toward the piano. Later, he played Debussy's Clair de Lune. Between the rise and fall of his fingers, a cold and clear halo seemed to flow throughout the room. When the piece ended, he stood up and left the table. As he passed me, he brought a faint scent of cedar. I put down the glass. My feet followed him. The night breeze on the terrace was slightly cool. He leaned against the railing, a scarlet point flickering at his fingertips. "Something wrong?" His voice was a few degrees colder than the piano sound. I walked beside him, imitating him to look at the city lights in the distance. "You play really well." "Thank you." Silence spread like the night. But I felt it was much more comfortable than the lively false pleasantries inside. "Vivian's brother," I turned my head, "what's your name?" He extinguished the cigarette, his profile particularly clear in the light and shadow. "Adrian." "Oh." I nodded, "I'm Claire. Julian's wife." Only then did he look at me directly. "I know." On the way back that night, Julian kept talking in the car. Talking about how hard Vivian's years had been, saying she was still so innocent and loved to laugh. I leaned against the car window, the glass reflecting my slightly upturned corners of the mouth. I was thinking of another face. That cold cedar scent seemed to still linger at the tip of my nose. "Are you listening?" Julian was somewhat displeased. "I'm listening." My voice was light, happy for her. He seemed choked. After arriving home, for the first time, he didn't go to the study but followed me into the bedroom. "Claire, let's talk." I took off my earrings and looked at him in the dressing mirror. "Talk about what?" About how many times you knocked over her wine glass tonight? His face changed. You do care after all. I shook my head. I don't care anymore. What I said was the truth. The emotion surging in his eyes suddenly felt so distant to me. I began to inquire about Adrian's information. A pianist, often touring abroad, with a solitary personality, rarely participating in social events. Likes Brahms, dislikes sweets. Every Wednesday afternoon, he would go to the old piano shop in the south of the city to tune pianos. In the street-facing window of that piano shop, there was an old Steinway. On Wednesday, I wore my newly bought misty blue skirt and passed by. He was bending over to inspect the strings, heard the wind chimes, and looked up. Seeing it was me, his hand movements paused. What a coincidence. I walked to the piano, my fingers stroking the shiny lacquer. Not a coincidence. He lowered his head to continue tuning. This street only leads to the piano shop. I laughed. Then consider it intentional on my part. He didn't respond, but the corner of his mouth seemed to curve slightly. Very slight. Julian began to come home late. With unfamiliar perfume scent mixed with alcohol. Sometimes he would test me, placing small items from Vivian in conspicuous places. A lipstick, a silk scarf. In the past, I would throw them in the trash. Now I just pretend not to see. My heart was very busy. Busy remembering the cafes Adrian often went to, the record brands he liked, his habit of slightly frowning when tuning. Love turns out to transfer like this. Not a sudden collapse. But like an hourglass, gradually emptying this side, quietly filling the other. Vivian finally took the initiative to meet me. In the tea-house private room, she looked pitiful. Sister Claire, don't blame Brother Julian, it's my fault. I stirred the matcha milk foam in the cup, suddenly remembering Adrian disliked sweets. Next time I should invite him for tea. Sister Claire? I came back to my senses and smiled at her. Your matters, handle them yourselves. The tears she had prepared froze in her eyes. You aren't angry? Not angry. I glanced at the time. Sorry, I have an appointment to see an art exhibition. As I stood up, I added softly. Also, just call me sister directly, we can be closer. She was stunned. The exhibition was of the abstract school that Adrian liked. I found him in front of a painting with chaotic colors. Today he wore a gray sweater, softening that cold sternness. You like Klein too? He asked. Starting to like it now. I answered frankly. He looked at me. That look was long. Long enough for me to see the faint shadow cast by his eyelashes. After viewing the exhibition, we went for a walk by the river. The late autumn wind was biting, but I felt warm inside. Julian isn't good to you. He suddenly said. Not a question, a statement. I kicked away a small pebble at my feet. It's all in the past. Then why are you still together? I stopped, turned to face him. The river wind messed up my hair and brightened my eyes. Because I was waiting for you to appear. He was stunned. His ear roots quietly climbed with a bit of red in the twilight. On Wednesday afternoon at the piano shop, sunlight through the old window cut warm golden grids on the old Steinway. I arrived a bit early. Adrian hadn't arrived yet, only the old man watching the shop was dozing, the radio yammering Suzhou Pingtan. I gently lifted the piano lid, fingers stroking the slightly yellowed ivory keys. Want to try? His voice came from behind, with a slight pant from walking fast. I withdrew my hand, turned and smiled, waiting for you to teach. Today he wore a light gray cotton linen shirt, sleeves casually rolled up, revealing slender wrists. Still that clean cedar scent on him. The first movement of moonlight, not difficult. He gestured for me to sit. The stool was narrow, we sat side by side, arms touching faintly. His fingers first pressed a few notes, demonstrating the fingering. Then he held my wrist, gently placing it on the keys. Here, lightly, like touching moonlight. His palm was warm, fingertips with thin calluses. My skin remembered that touch. That day he taught me for half an hour. I learned slowly, often playing wrong. He never urged, only when I got stuck, he would hold my hand again and guide through. You have great patience, I said when leaving. Tuning pianos requires even more patience. He locked the piano shop door, calibrating one string at a time, can't rush. We strolled along the old street. The autumn sycamore leaves were half yellow, falling rustling with the wind. He walked steadily, steps neither hurried nor slow. I followed his rhythm, feeling for the first time that walking could be pleasant. Your sister often comes to find Julian, I suddenly said. Adrian was silent for a moment. Vivian is spoiled. His voice was faint, always thinks what she likes should be hers. What about you? I asked, would you snatch someone else's things? He stopped, turned to look at me. His gaze deep like an autumn pool. I only wait. Wait for what? Wait for it to come over on its own. A sycamore leaf happened to fall on my shoulder. He reached out to brush it off, the action natural as if done 1,000 times. Julian recently rarely came home for dinner. When he did, there was always lingering perfume mixed with whiskey and tobacco. He started bringing me gifts. Expensive silk scarves, limited edition perfumes, dazzling diamond necklaces in jewelry boxes. All things that the old me would have been overjoyed to tears about. Now I just faintly say thank you, too lazy to even open the box. You don't like it? Last night he stopped me, eyes bloodshot. I like it. I put the necklace back in the jewelry box, just not suitable for me anymore. Then what suits you? His voice was a bit urgent, tell me, I'll buy it. I looked at him, suddenly feeling unfamiliar. This man who spent money on me seemed to have never truly seen me. Rest early. I bypassed him and went upstairs. At the stair turn, I glimpsed him standing in the center of the living room, clutching that necklace. The light pulled his shadow very long. Lonely like an island. Adrian and I started dating like couples. Though neither said the word. On Friday night, he took me to a small restaurant hidden deep in the alley. The owner was his old acquaintance, a retired symphony orchestra violinist. The shop had only 4 tables, menu written on a blackboard, different every day. The usual? The owner asked with a smile. Adrian nodded, then looked at me, eat fish? The scallion braised crucian here is good. Okay. While waiting for dishes, he told me fun stories from orchestra tours. Said before performing at Vienna's Golden Hall, the whole orchestra had stomach issues. Said in Tokyo, encountered crazy fans chasing 3 streets. Said playing piano under Reykjavik's aurora, keys freezing fingers numb. I propped my chin listening, watching his slightly upturned mouth corners when speaking. Those distant lives I hadn't participated in, now unfolding before me through his narration. What about you? He suddenly asked, besides being Julian's wife, who are you? I was stunned. This question, Julian had never asked. I like painting, I said, but haven't painted for a long time. Why? Julian said those paints smell bad, painting tools take up space. After saying, I was stunned myself. Turns out these years, I lost so much of myself. Adrian quietly looked at me. Next time come to the piano shop, bring your painting tools. He said, there's an empty room on the 2nd floor, good light. The crucian came, steaming hot. He carefully picked out big bones, clipped the fattest belly to my bowl. Careful, still small bones. I lowered my head to eat fish, eyes a bit hot. Saturday afternoon, we went to the art museum. On exhibit was French Impressionist paintings, Monet's Water Lilies original rarely toured here. Not many people in the hall, we stood long before sunrise impression. The colors seemed to flow. I said softly. Like Debussy's music. He said. We looked at each other simultaneously, smiled. That tacit understanding needed no explanation. After the exhibit, we rested at the museum cafe. He ordered black coffee, I wanted hot chocolate. Sweets make people happy, I said. Temporary happiness, he said faintly, but reached over, using fingertip to wipe cream from my lip. The action natural enough to make my heart skip a beat. Outside the window, it started raining. Autumn rain fine, covering the world in a hazy gray veil. We weren't in a hurry to leave, just watching the rain like that. Julian accompanied Vivian to try wedding dresses today, I suddenly said. Words out, I was surprised at this calm. Adrian turned the coffee cup. I know. You didn't advise your sister? Advised. He looked out the window, she said this is the dream she's waited 10 years for. Rain sound pattering. What about you? I asked, what's your dream? He turned his head, gaze falling on my face. After a long time, he said lowly, a dream that won't wake. Julian came back late at night, with a body of alcohol, and glaring kiss marks on his neck. He collapsed on the sofa, calling my name. Claire. Claire. I stood on the stairs, coldly watching him. You're awake? He groggily sat up, pour me a glass of water. I didn't move. He rubbed his temples, voice hoarse. Vivian cried today, said sorry to you. I said it's okay, you're very magnanimous. I laughed. The laughter seemed abrupt in the quiet night. Julian raised his head, drunk eyes hazily looking at me. What are you laughing at? Laughing at myself. I slowly walked down the stairs, and at you. I poured a glass of water, placed it on the coffee table. The sound of the glass bottom touching marble, crisp like some kind of break. Julian, how long has it been since we talked properly? He was stunned. What you're busy with every day, who you're with, I don't ask, you don't say. I sat opposite him. And what I'm doing, thinking, you never care. He opened his mouth, wanting to defend something. But I continued. Just like this glass of water. I pointed at the coffee table, you only think of it when thirsty. Drink it, put it down, until thirsty again to pick up. You never think if the water is cold, if the glass is dirty, or... I paused. Whether it wants to be taken like this forever. Julian's drunkenness seemed half sober. He looked at me, eyes from confused gradually becoming clear. Then panicked. Claire, did you hear something from others? Do I need to hear from others? I asked calmly, the perfume on you, marks on neck, coming home at dawn, which needs others to tell me? His face paled. Vivian and I aren't what you think. What do I think? I interrupted, Julian, I don't think anymore. I stood up. From today, do as you like. We have nothing to do with each other. I turned upstairs. Halfway, heard his hoarse voice, you've changed. I stopped, didn't look back. Yes. I said, finally changed. On Sunday, Adrian invited me to the old book market in South City. Called Book Market, actually an old street along the river, weekends full of old book stalls. Air had musty paper scent mixed with riverside damp vapor. We stopped at a stall selling scores. Adrian squatted, carefully flipping. Sunlight through sycamore branches danced on his shoulder. I watched his focused profile, suddenly wanted to paint it. Found it. He pulled out a yellowed booklet. Schumann's Scenes from Childhood, first edition, page edges already brittle. Here. He handed me, meeting gift. I opened, inner pages had small pencil notes, neat handwriting. This is my teacher's score from youth. He smiled, later lost here. Too precious, I can't accept. Accept it. He closed my fingers, it should belong to who cherishes it. We continued forward. Passing a stall selling old porcelain, I glimpsed a pair of blue and white small cups. Glaze warm, painted with twining lotuses. Like? Adrian asked. He paid, handed me one. One each. I held that small cup, palm warm. Like holding a small, complete moon. At noon we ate noodles at a small noodle shop by the river. His skill better than the owner's, picked out cilantro clean for me. How did you know I don't eat cilantro? I was surprised. Last time eating fish, you pushed it all aside. Such a small action, he remembered. Noodle soup steam rose, blurring his face, also my eyes. Adrian. I called softly. If I met you earlier. If I hadn't married Julian. If. The rest, I didn't say. But he seemed to understand all. Across the steam, his hand crossed the table, gently covering my hand back. No ifs. He said, only now. Julian started coming home on time. At 6:30, the key-turning lock sound would ring punctually. He often carried things, a bunch of fresh lilies, a box of old brand pastries, even once a plush toy bear. Past flower shop, saw lilies blooming well. Wong's osmanthus cake, you used to love. Does the bear look like you? Round eyes. When handing me these, his eyes had cautious pleasing. Like a child who did wrong handing remedial homework. I took, said thanks, then inserted flowers in vase, pastries in fridge, bear on sofa corner. Action smooth, no pause, no surprise. Julian stood at entrance watching me, mouth smile gradually stiff. What to eat tonight? He took off coat, I'll make. Anything. I held drawing board preparing upstairs. Today appointed with Adrian to paint sunset. Claire. He called me. I looked back. Today we. He weighed words, like before, have a good meal, okay? His eyes' sincerity so genuine. If half a year ago, I'd be overjoyed. Now I only felt tired. Okay. I said. Then turned upstairs. Closing door, heard him sigh lightly downstairs. Studio faces west, afternoon light best. I set up easel, mixed paints. Canvas still had last week's sketch, piano corner, a slender hand on keys. Only hand, no person. But every time I look, I recall Adrian's profile when lowering head tuning. Phone vibrated. Today piano shop got a 1932 Bechstein, beautiful tone. Want to hear? Adrian's messages always like this. Not asking if free, just giving an irresistible invitation. What time? Sunset time. Piano on second floor, window west. I looked out window. Autumn sky vast, clouds dyed faint gold powder. Okay. I'll bring painting tools. Waiting. Put down phone, I continued mixing colors. Cobalt blue plus a bit rose red, the color of dusk sky about to darken. Dinner was Julian's 3 dishes 1 soup. Stir-fried veggies, sweet sour ribs, scallion tofu, and a pot milky Christian soup. His cooking improved a lot. Fish soup thick, no fishy smell, sprinkled fine scallions. Try. He ladled a bowl for me. I took, scooped a spoon. Temperature just right, saltiness suitable. Good. I said. His eyes lit up, like a praised child. Then I'll make for you every day. I didn't respond, lowered head drinking soup. Table very quiet, only light clinks of bowl's chopsticks. Julian tried to speak several times, looked at my face, swallowed back. Finally he said, today Vivian called, said wants to see play. I clipped a piece tofu. I declined. He said quickly, I said, have to go home accompany wife eat. After saying he looked at me, like waiting some reaction. I raised head. Actually you can go. He stunned. Play tickets hard to buy, don't waste. My tone calm, even considerate. But Julian's face gradually paled. Claire, his voice astringent, I chose you. I put down chopsticks. Outside window sky completely dark. Julian, I said softly, choosing me isn't what should be? He opened mouth, no sound. I'm your wife. I continued, you choose me, like eating with chopsticks, raining with umbrella, it's duty, not favor. But you before I was silly. I laughed, took duty as deep love, should as favor. Now I'm not silly. I stood, started clearing dishes. Julian sat there, motionless. Light from above illuminated, cast shadow deep and heavy. I'm going to piano shop. I washed dishes, dried hands, back later. Learning piano again? His voice dry hoarse. That teacher, male or female? I went to entrance change shoes. Important? Closing door, from crack I saw him. He lowered head, shoulders slumped, like a puppet drained of strength. Piano shop second floor more beautiful than imagined. That old Bechstein by window, dark gold lacquer flowing honey-like luster in sunset. Adrian on stool, testing sound. Hearing my footsteps, he turned. Good timing. He played a short melody. Notes flowed from piano case, mellow, warm, like aged wine. Schubert's Impromptu. He said, suitable for dusk listening. I sat beside him. Easel set by window, paints mixed. You paint, I play. He said. Thus dusk had color and sound. His fingers undulated on keys, my brush smeared on canvas. Sunset inch by inch shifted, pulling our shadows long, finally overlapping on floor. At some moment, he played to a passage, suddenly stopped. Here, he pointed score, always play bad. I leaned to see. Continuous triplets modulation, complex fingering. I'll try. My hand just on keys, he from behind held my hand. His chest against my back, breath brushing my ear. Like this, he moved my fingers, light, but forceful. Our hands danced on keys. Notes like alive, leaping out. That short segment finished, neither moved. Sunset just sank behind buildings, sky afterburn ember color. Claire. He called lowly. If I returned earlier. No ifs. I leaned into his embrace, now is the best time. His arms encircled me, chin on my hair top. We sat like that, watching sky from orange red to indigo. Watching first star light up. Like someone finally opened eyes. Julian started following me. At first I didn't notice. Until one day leaving piano shop, on corner cafe glass window, saw reflection familiar car shadow. Black Mercedes, plate tail Julian's birthday. I stood roadside, took phone message Adrian. Someone following me. Minutes later, he came out piano shop, carrying my painting box. I'll escort you. We walked side by side on Old Street Slate Road. His hand naturally around my shoulder. I turned head, for my corner saw that car slowly following. Like a silent stubborn shadow. Not afraid he sees? I asked. Adrian lowered head look me. You afraid? I thought, shook head. Then let him see. We walked slowly, like strolling. Passing sugar-fried chestnut stall, he bought a pack, peeled first one gave me. Warm hands. Chestnut hot, sweet fragrance in cold air. I ate chestnut, he carried painting box. That car followed behind, at not far not near distance. Like a silent confrontation. At community gate, Adrian stopped. Up to here. I nodded, took painting box. He suddenly leaned, lightly printed a kiss on my forehead. Very light, like fallen leaf touching water. See tomorrow. See tomorrow. I turned into community. From gate to building, over 100 steps. I felt that gaze behind. Burning, painful, like burning a hole in my back. But I didn't look back. Not once. The argument erupted on a Friday night. Adrian had a small private recital, invited me as sole audience. In South City old villa, owner his old friend, France residing piano collector. That night I wore ink green velvet long dress, pearl earrings. When Adrian picked me, eyes unmasked amazement. Like walking out of Renaissance painting. I smiled, holding his arm. Recital short, only 6 pieces. But each played for me. Last piece end, collector old man clapped, walking over. Adrian never played like this for anyone. He smiled at me, this miss, you're special. I blushed, Adrian gripped my hand tight. And already midnight. Adrian sent me home, car stopped outside community. We stood under streetlight, farewell. Next week I go Berlin perform. He said, 10 days. So long. If you want, he looked me, can come together. Berlin autumn galleries beautiful. My heart beat faster. I'll consider. Good. He lowered head, kissed my lips. This kiss deep, with reluctance and promise flavor. Separating, we both panted. Go in. He fixed my side hair, arrived message. I nodded, turned into community. Steps light like flying. Living room lights bright. Julian sat sofa, ashtray front piled butts. He watched me enter, eyes like ice like fire. Had fun? His voice hoarse. I put down bag. Okay. That man, he paused, each word squeezed from teeth, is Vivian's brother, right? My hand removing coat paused slightly, then continued hanging coat. Yes. Yes? He stood abruptly, step by step approaching, so this time you run out every day, to piano shop, see exhibition, listen concert, all with him? I didn't deny, turned facing him. Yes. Last trace color faded from his face. Why him specifically? Voice shaking badly, anyone, why specifically Vivian's brother? I watched surging shock, humiliation, absurd anger in his eyes, suddenly felt somewhat funny. Is this important? Important. He low roared, Claire, you're using this way to revenge me and Vivian, right? I quietly watched his face red from agitation. Revenge? I softly repeated, shook head, Julian, you overestimate yourself. He stunned. I don't need to revenge you. I walked to wine cabinet, poured water, cool glass wall sobered me, I just happened to fall in love with him. That's all. Happened? He like heard absurd joke, happened to love someone who embarrasses me most? Happened when me and Vivian. Julian, I interrupted, voice calm, you and Vivian, already past tense. Now it's me and Adrian. He staggered, held sofa back, as if unsteady. You admit you cheated? If you insist on saying so. I put down water glass, turned, fully facing him, then, yes. I fell in love with Adrian. I want to be with him. I paused, clearly said, so, let's divorce. Air dead silent. He stared fixedly, eyes from initial rage to huge panic. Claire. He grabbed my skirt hem, knelt, tears rolled without warning, I was wrong, I really know wrong. Like countless times before after cheating begging forgiveness. Don't leave me, please. I looked down at him. This once high-spirited man, now kneeling at my feet, tears flowing. Once I'd pity, soften, forgive again and again. Now I only feel pathetic. Julian, get up. I said, this looks ugly. I won't. He hugged my legs tight, unless you promise not leave me. Claire, start over, okay? I give you all company shares, house car all to you, I want nothing, I only want you. He cried like a child. Tears wet my skirt. Julian. I said softly, you still don't understand? He raised face, full tears. I don't love you anymore. From your first all-night absence, first lie to me, first time giving my gentleness to others. My voice calm like saying others' affairs. Love died bit by bit. Now it's thoroughly dead. Not even ashes left. He shook head, desperately. No, not, you still love me, you're just angry at me and Vivian. I'm not angry anymore. I squatted, looked his eyes, Julian, I'm really not angry. Because I don't care. He stunned, tears on lashes. Who you're with now, what doing, what time home? I don't care. Like you won't care how many leaves the tree outside dropped today. That has nothing to do with me. I slowly drew out the skirt hem he clutched. Action light, but firm. Divorce agreement I'll have lawyer prepare. House to me, deposit split, company shares I want none. From now on, you're free. Can openly love Vivian, give her status, have children with her. I stood, walked to stairs. And I will love who I want. This is good, isn't it? Julian knelt in place, motionless. His face expression from despair, to blank, to some empty numbness. Claire. He murmured, you really, don't want me? I didn't answer. Turned upstairs. Halfway, heard his suppressed, broken sobs. Like injured beast howling in midnight. I didn't stop. Pushed open bedroom door, moonlight spilled full bed. I picked phone, message Adrian. I told him. Seconds later, screen lit. Wait for me back. Okay. I put down phone, walked to window. Night sky clear, stars full. Adrian and my wedding held in spring. No grand banquet, only in piano shop second floor old villa, invited few close friends. I wore simple beige satin long dress, his mother's left pearl earrings. He played Schumann's Dedication as prelude. Piano sound like water, flowing over sun-filled wood floor, over windowsill fresh pear blossoms. Exchanging rings, his fingers trembled slightly, plain ring on my ring finger paused moment, then slowly pushed to base. Very light, but like some eternal settling. Done. He lowered head kissed my hand back, now you're mine. Guests smiled clapping. Outside window sycamores sprouting new buds, tender green transparent. Post-wedding days like a slow andante. We lived in South City apartment with small courtyard. He still went piano shop tuning, teaching, occasionally abroad for performances. I picked up brush again, opened small studio in north-facing room. Life had clear outline, morning shared coffee aroma, afternoon intersecting black-white keys and colorful blocks, dusk side by side trimming roses in courtyard. Arguments rare. Occasional differences, mostly he stopped first, came over hugged from behind, chin on my hair. Rest a bit. He said, wait till you want to say. Nights, we often nestled sofa watching old movies. His fingers unconsciously played my hair, I leaned on his shoulder, drowsy, could hear his steady heartbeat. Like tides, eternal and reliable. News about Julian came intermittently. He and Vivian ultimately didn't marry. Said engagement banquet booked, but cancelled at last moment. Some said property disputes, some said Vivian climbed higher branch. More vague rumor, Julian once drunk hit Vivian, for some ambiguous contact on her phone. True or false hard to tell. But once at gallery opening cocktail, I glimpsed him from afar. Julian stood crowd edge, suit still expensive, but seemed empty. Gaze swept hall, moment met mine, he like scalded fiercely turned face away. Quickly turned left, back somewhat flustered. Adrian then discussing a painting's brushstrokes with me, didn't notice. I withdrew gaze, gently placed champagne on waiter's tray. Tired? He asked lowly. A bit. I held his arm, let's go home. That evening light rain. Car passing old district, I saw Julian alone walking out small tavern. No umbrella, fine rain wet his hair and shoulders. He stood roadside lit a cigarette, flame flickered instant in twilight, reflecting a much thinner face. Red light green, car slowly drove away. In rear view, that figure smaller, finally disappeared in hazy rain curtain. Like a water-soaked old painting, faded, no longer clear outline. I didn't look back. Another autumn, I held first solo exhibition. Themed shapes of light and time. Exhibited mostly fragments of our life, moonlight on windowsill, fingers leaping on keys, wet roses in courtyard after rain. Adrian played for opening. Last piece ended, he walked to me, in crowd's gazes, naturally lowered head kissed my cheek. In applause, familiar gallery boss smiled teasing, "Mr. Adrian is our famous iceberg, now melted spring snow." He also laughed, held my hand, fingertips warm. Claire's credit. Third day of exhibit, received and signed bouquet. White irises, with some pale green eucalyptus. Flower card blank, only embossed gold logo of familiar florist, the one Julian used to order from. I inserted flowers separately in gallery front desk glass bottles, mixed with other congratulatory flowers. Turning, saw Adrian standing before a painting. Painted rainy night Old Street, a street lamp halo warm yellow light, ground puddle reflecting blurred, side by side two shadows. He quietly looked long. I walked over, gently held his hand. He held back, force gentle firm. Outside window, autumn sun just right. Light through sycamore branches, cast shaking, broken gold-like spots on wood floor. Exhibition end that night, we nestled sofa counting postcards. Some audience left blessings, also childish kids drew crooked piano and flowers with crayons. Flipped to bottom, a plain white card. Above only one line printed small words, "The light in your paintings, very beautiful." No signature. Font neat song, no handwritten trace. Adrian just resting head on my shoulder napping, breathing even. I picked card, looked against light, then gently clipped into a thick art book. Closed book, light paw sound. Like closing a distant, already written story. Tired? He asked groggily, arms tightened my waist. Not tired. I turned off floor lamp, in deepening night leaned into his embrace, just feel, now like this is good. He responded drowsily, kissed my hair top, will always be good. Moonlight slipped through curtain gap, spread soft silver white path on floor. Outside window, night wind through sycamores, rustling. Like time itself, gently, unhurriedly, flowing to deeper farther tranquility. And I in this tranquility, finally found my own, complete home.